Hi everyone, so I'm shooting at a different angle here in my home office, and it's actually evening right now, so it's good evening to each and every one of you. And the reason why I am shooting at this time of the day is because it has been very hot and humid here in the Philippines for the past few days, that it's quite impossible to shoot during broad daylight because of the heat that's coming out of the earth. It just makes it so impossible, and I am sweating all day. So I'm actually quite grateful that it rained a few minutes ago. So it made the air a little bit cool. But as you guys can see, I look a little bit sweaty. So I do apologize. It's actually very humid as we speak. And the artificial light that I am using is not helpful in bringing down the shine. But even if this is the situation that I have at the moment, it hasn't really dulled the enthusiasm that I have in making this video, because I have a mini brush haul with us today. Yay! So I'm sure you've seen me unbox these in my short video that I just released a few days ago, and so these are it. So the brushes that I have here, well, these four brushes are from Chikuhodo, which arrived individually wrapped, and of course you can see its Kumano Fude seal. And this brush here is from Koyudo, which arrived in its own black box, and I was actually expecting to see the Kumano Fude seal on the plastic packaging of the brush, but it's actually seen on the side of the box. And this is a cheek brush from their Kakishibuzome series. So this is actually quite special, mainly because of the dyeing technique used in coloring the bristles of the brush head. So as you guys can see, it looks very pretty and it looks very dusky, and like my first impression with the brush here, it looks very elegant. So it's actually very beautiful and it's actually very pretty. And the other four brushes that I have here from Chikuhodo, so let me get them. Now this brush is the FO-10 from the FO series of Chikuhodo, and these three belong to the C series of Chikuhodo. So I have here the Z-5, this is the Z-10, and this is the Z-11. So what I'm going to be doing right now is I'm going to talk about these brushes individually, and if you do want to, you can just I think I'm going to put a timestamp on the description box so that you can just jump to whatever brush that you are curious about. Okay, now the first brush that I'm going to be talking about is the Chikuhodo FO-10. Now I've been very intrigued with this brush ever since it was released, mainly because of the brush head design. So the FO-10 brush is a very typical brush from the FO series of Chikuhodo. So it still has this very short handle, as you guys can see compared here to the FO-5. We still have this bamboo kind of a handle design with the green ferrule with a dual chrome golden color. Now the brush head of the Chikuhodo FO-10 is actually quite small, as you guys can see here, but it's actually quite dense, and it has a very nice snap back into position. So it has a very strong core and belly, and I'm sure you can see the shape of the bristle here. As I've said earlier, it actually reminds me of the shape of the pads of our fingers. So when I am looking at the brush like this, I say to myself, I can use this the way that I would use my fingers. So of course, with our fingers, we can always use this under our eyes, or even to add eyeshadow, things like that, or highlighters, or even lip colors, because after all, this is a silver fox brush head. So you can use this for powders or even liquids and creams. So it's really that resilient, and I have to say it's actually very soft to the touch. Now the brush head, if I could compare it to, because comparison to the FO-5 here, we can see the difference in the length of the brush heads, right? And we can also see that they have a difference in the airiness. So of course the FO-5 will deliver a much more diffused color than the FO-10. Now in terms of brush head size, I could really compare the FO-10 to the Lotus Builder, because if we see from the lip of the ferrule, they have the same length, especially as they reach the tips here of the bristle. Again, the brush head is very strong. It has a very nice resiliency to it, and if you just put it here at the pads of my hand, you can see that it doesn't splay out much, so we don't get a lot of blending with this. So when I see a brush like this, I can use this to actually build the intensity of the color that I am using, either on the eyes or on the face. Alright, so now let me try to use this first, and I plan to use this in more ways than one, but for this part of the video, I'm going to use this to apply concealer first, and I have here my SC4 concealer from Laura Mercier, and this is actually their Secret Camouflage. As you guys can see, it's very well loved, and the reason why I'm using this is because this is one of the most, like, very, like, not hard, I have to say, but the formulation of this is not very creamy like the other, like, types of concealers that are in the market. So you actually need a very strong brush to pick up this product, and I have to say that this brush is actually able to do so. Alright, so just out of curiosity, let's just apply that here in my under eye area. And I'm just using this the way that I am using my fingers. So I think you guys can see right now the way that this brush is applying the product in my under eye area, and it's actually applying a very nice thin layer. And I do have to say it feels very, very soft. I don't feel any, like, poking in my under eye area. I also don't feel much dragging, but then again, I am using this, like, in a patting motion, and I have to say it's actually doing quite good of a job. Okay, so as you guys can see, my under eye is now quite bright, and the coverage is actually not full, which I actually like because I have to be very careful when I am using this product, because if you apply way too much, it can become cakey very fast. Okay, and then just like that, I'm just blending out the edges and blending it well into my skin. Yeah, so I'm not wearing any foundation at the moment because I don't think foundation is going to stick to my skin right now because of the humidity, and because of course my internal body temperature is also quite hot, so it's very difficult to wear makeup when it's like this. Okay, so again, no poking when I am, like, doing this, like, and I am applying the product with a brush head using the tips here, so it actually feels very comfortable, and I think I'm going to be buying more of this because I really believe that I can use this brush in more ways than one. Alright, that is actually quite beautiful. Okay, not bad at all. I love that. So just out of curiosity, I have here my Laura Mercier loose setting powder, and I'm just picking up a little bit of the product using the FO-10 brush. Now, by the way, before I did this, I brushed off any excess camouflage on a microfiber towel, and I'm just going to use this brush to set the concealer in my under eye area. Okay, so you have to be careful with the brush head here because it's so small, it's so compact, and it's so dense, it will pick up a ton of products. So just make sure that you tap off the excess at the back of your hand before you apply the powder in your under eye area. Okay, so when I am applying the powder this way, and I'm just, like, sweeping the brush along my under eye, it feels very, very silky, it feels very soft. And despite the density of this brush head, I don't feel any, like, tugging at all, which is actually perfect. It's amazing. It applies an even amount of product. Alright, so this is the Chikuhodo FO-10 brush. Now, I'm not finished with this brush yet. We'll go back and use this a little bit later, okay? And now, the next brush that I have here is the Koyudo Kakishibuzome cheek brush. Now, this has been in my basket like, for months, and it would go in and out, and the last time that this went out of my basket was because Sonia G released her Mount Fuji brush, and unfortunately I couldn't get that brush because it's way beyond, like, the purchase cap on Beautylish. Now this one and that one, what made them so similar is actually the dyeing technique used in adding this very nice, like, dusky color on the brush head. So let me put it down here. So as we see here, it is a very nice dusky color here on the bristles of this full head of Saikoho goat hair. So it's actually quite beautiful, and it's still very, very soft to the touch. And this is how the entire brush looks like from brush head tip to the tip of the handle here. So it has this very nice, like, orangey golden brown kind of a color for a ferrule. It's very smooth, and it works very well with a very nice, like, shiny black ferrule here, which is actually crimp here, by the way. And we have the Koyudo brand engraved here on the ferrule of this cheek brush. It's so beautiful and so pretty and so elegant. Now, the word Kakishibuzome actually has three meanings. Kaki means persimmon, and then shibu means the tannins that is collected from the persimmon fruit. So it's like an antiseptic of sort, and that is actually what creates the dye, the color here on the brush head. Now, the word zome means dyeing. So basically, the Koyodo Kakishibuzome brush is a brush that is dyed using persimmon tannins. So that's basically it. And that is also the main reason why I was very intrigued in having this brush or even the Mount Fuji brush from Sonia G. And I'm just so glad that I was able to have it. So there's a very nice airy nature to the brush head of this cheek brush. And you can see how full it is and how airy it is if you put it to the side. And if you tilt it here to the top, it has a very oval, ovoid kind of a thing. At least you can use this to apply contouring or some cheek color, because after all, the brush head design here is actually flat and round. So it's like a combination of like a paddle brush and a round brush in one. So it's a very typical brush head design for its purpose as a cheek brush. So the brush head is actually very soft. As you guys can see here, it has a very nice bounce back into position. Look at how airy that is, how very soft, but also how very strong, because it snaps back into position quite nicely and it doesn't splay out much. So there's some strength into the belly of this here, because if I could compare the softness of the brush head of this cheek brush, it would be to the Chikuhodo FO-10 brush. Now, these are two very different brush heads. I have to tell you guys that first, but I do have to say, just by running both brushes here on the palms of my hands, they actually feel almost the same in terms of softness and silkiness. But I have to say, they have a difference in the strength of their core of their brush heads, mainly because if we tap them here, we can see that the Kakishibuzome from Koyodo here, if you press it, it doesn't splay out much. So there's a strength on the belly here, especially at the middle portion of the brush head. So if I just press it, it doesn't really splay much. So it means this has more buffing power, because the FO-10 here, if I just press it, you can see how much it splays out, and I'm only using very minimal pressure here, by the way. So this will apply a much more diffuse color instantly. So if you want to have a brush that has more buffing power, then the Koyudo Kakishibuzome will work for you, especially if you have sensitive skin. The reason why I only got the cheek brush is because, as I've said in previous videos before, it's not my plan to get every single brush that is released in the market, but I actually want to have different brush heads with different types of bristles, or even dyeing techniques used to add colors to them. So that's the main reason why I decided to get this, and that's also the main reason why I decided to get the cheek color only, because I like small brushes, and these are the most useful brushes that I have in my collection. Okay, so now let's see how well this applies color into the face. But first, I'm going to apply a very light coverage of loose powder, and I'm going to see if I'm going to like this brush for this purpose. Well, although I can see now that I can use this brush for this purpose, I am finding that it just applies a very concentrated amount of product in a specific area. So for I do really need to have a much more bigger brush head, because if I load the brush head here with a ton of powder, I can see that I get a concentration of powder in a specific point of my face where the brush has first landed. So with that exercise alone, I can say that this brush is actually perfect to use as a cheek brush. But I do have to say though that as I am running the brush head all over my face, I can say that it's very, very soft. Even there's no poking sensation at all. Can you see the strength of the brush here as I'm just pressing it here on my cheek? It doesn't splay out much, it doesn't flare out much. So at least this can be used to give ooh, a targeted amount of color in a specific area of the face. And again, I love the size of it. It's quite small and it will work well with the frame of my face. Alright, so since this is a cheek brush, I'm going to use it with some cheek products. So I'm going to first start by using this Bellini powder blush from Laura Mercier. This is in a matte formula, so let's see how well this is going to apply color in the cheeks. Okay, so I think you can see the color already that's being applied. And I have to say that it's actually applying a very nice diffused color on the cheeks. It's also blending it out quite nicely. It's actually quite beautiful the way it applies the color, not too much. Adding more here on the other side of my cheek now. Now again, this is dyed. The brush head is dyed, so at least you can use this with very nice hard pressed powders. And for sure, you can use this brush for very nice loose blush colors, in loose powder form. I'm actually liking how well this blush is applying a matte formula of a blush. I mean, you can't go wrong if you're so scared in applying matte colors, because you're so scared of the impact that it's going to create on your face. This brush can really help you apply a very nice well blended, well balanced amount of color on the cheeks. Alright, so now I'm actually quite curious how well this brush is going to apply baked gelée formulas, and I want to try this baked gelée formula of the NARS Orgasm. So this was from the Orgasm on the Beach palette. I love this palette and it's one of my go-to. So let's see if this will pick up products of this formula. So I think you guys can see that it has added this very nice sheen on my cheeks. It's even able to lay the shimmers on the highest points of my cheeks, which is actually quite pretty. And it's actually able to blend into the matte blush that I applied earlier from Laura Mercier. That actually is very pretty. That's actually quite well balanced. Very nice. And now I'm going to talk about these three eyeshadow brushes from the Z series of Chikuhodo. So the main reason what got me so curious about these eyeshadow brushes from the Z series of Chikuhodo is because I have come to enjoy a lot of the eyeshadow brushes that were released by Chikuhodo for their limited edition release. Now, the main difference with those limited editions and these three is that these three is made of gray squirrel bristles for their brush heads, and most of the Chikuhodo brushes that I have been released before, like this is made of Sokoho hair. This one is made of pine squirrel, which is a very recent. So I don't really have a variety of Chikuhodo brushes in my collection, but I do have to say I have come to enjoy these types of brush head designs from them. So let me just get them and let me put them side by side. Okay, so this is the Z-5, and as you guys can see here, the brush head is actually quite squarish. And of all the Chikuhodo brushes that I have in my collection, I think that this is comparable to the eyeshadow brush from the Keramiki Purple set. As you guys can see here, they're almost the same in terms of brush design, but there's a difference in their airiness, because the Keramiki Purple the eyeshadow brush from the Keramiki Purple set here is actually more airier, and it has more blending capability just basing on the brush head design here, while the Z-5 here, if we tilt it to the side, it's more compact, and it tapers into this rounded point at the tips of the bristles of this eyeshadow brush. Now, if I'm just going to compare this to the other eyeshadow brushes from Chikuhodo, so this is the PS4, one of my most favorite, and this is the eyeshadow brush from the Soiree set that was released a few years ago. We can see that the brush heads are, there's a similarity between them, but there's also a difference. And if we put them all to the side, we can see that they can all be siblings, wherein they can fit in between each other when you line them up, and if you want them to use them for a very specific kind of an eyeshadow application. Now, of course, this one, because this is made of full gray squirrel hair, this will only pick up a very minute amount of color on the pan of the eyeshadow that you are using to apply on the eyelid. Now, I can actually compare this more to this Pine Squirrel brush from the Chocolat 5-piece set collection that was released recently. And if we tilt them to the side, we can see that they almost have the same, like, compactness in terms of, like, the design of the brush head and the way that they almost, like, taper into a point here. And I can say that both of these eyeshadow brushes are actually very soft, but then again, the Z-5 here is softer than this eyeshadow brush. And as I've said before, I think Pine Squirrel eyeshadow brushes have more strength in them, so they have more buffing capability. So if you have, like, sensitive eyes, this is a nice brush to use. Like, even the tips here, you can use it, like, to apply color in, like, here in the under eye area, which is actually great. Or I'm sure you can also use this to apply, like, color here in your socket line, but we shall see how that will work. All right, and the next brush that I have here is the Z-10 brush, and it has this very nice tapered design here. And I always, like, define this type of a brush as a defining brush. Now, the main reason why I decided to get this is because I actually fell in love with the definer brush from the Chocolat 5-piece set that was released for the 2023 holiday season. And look at that. If I'm just gonna put them side by side here, they almost have the same brush head length, but they taper very differently. And, like, their fullness is also very different, wherein you have more fullness in the brush head of the Z-10 here in comparison to that of this brush head from the Chocolat set. Now, I do have to say that the Z-10 here is actually quite soft, and I think this will apply a very precise amount of product or color into the eyes, because I can feel the strength of this brush head here. It's not bad at all in comparison to the Pine Squirrel brush head here. This one is very soft, while this one here, it's still soft, but I think you guys can see how strong it is in the belly here. It doesn't really, like, waver much, unlike the definer brush here from the Chocolat set of Chikuhodo. Amazing. And to me, this type of a brush head always, like, acts like a pencil brush. So I'm actually quite excited to see how this will work for us this evening. And the final brush that I'm going to be talking about is the Chikuhodo Z-11 brush, and this is the blending brush. So as you guys can see here, it is very, very soft. So if you have, like, very sensitive eyelids, this is a nice brush to use, because this will not drag your eyelids, or it will not at all feel like, that it's tugging. It's actually very, very soft, but I can feel some strength to the belly of it. So let me just tap it here on the, like, palms of my hand. So it does play out, so it has some blending capability, but it's actually very soft. So this will not pick up a ton of pigment from your eyeshadows, and when this applies, it's gonna be apply a very nice soft diffuse coloring on the eyes. Now, for comparison, I don't have a lot of, like, eyeshadow brushes with this type of, like, brush design, because most of them are tapered. Like, for example, this is the Mizuho CMP 527. Okay, I'm not sure if I got the name right, so I'm just gonna flash it here on the screen. So as you guys can see here, if I'm just gonna put it side by side, so the Z11 here has a much more dome shaped brush head. It's still round, so that's actually very pretty. And the Mizuho brush here is actually more, like, tapered. It tapers into a point here. So the Mizuho brush also is not a full squirrel brush. This is actually a mix of pony. The Mizuho brush here is actually very, very resilient. It has some strength in it, but it's not as soft as a Z11, I have to say. Now, I also have another squirrel brush head here. Now, I think this is also made of gray squirrel / blue squirrel, depends on the way that the description of this brush from Hakuhodo is translated, the S142. So again, we can see that the S142 here actually tapers into a point, but it's rounder in comparison to the brush head here of Mizuho. But the Z11 here has a much more prominent round brush head. What else do I have here? Okay, now this one is from Chikuhodo, and this is the G5533. Now this one is made of full gray squill, and the brush head here is actually quite different, wherein it's actually flatter in comparison to that of the Z11. Now the G5533 is actually very soft, as I'm sure you guys can see. There's no strength in the belly of this brush whatsoever. So this brush will actually apply a very thin gradation of color into the eyes. So I'm just gonna tap my finger here on top of the brush head of the Z11, and you can see how strong it is and how resilient it is. So at least we know that the Z11 will actually pick up more pigment than the G5533. And just for comparison, because I don't have a lot of squirrel eyeshadow brushes in my collection, now the Polydorf brush, because the bristle is actually shorter than the Z11, it's going to act stronger. So if I tap my finger here, you guys can see that it has some strength in the belly here in comparison to the Z11. But that's to be expected, because after all, again, as I said, this is a very short bristle brush in comparison to the Z11. But they're both very soft to the touch, and they have they have a very nice luxurious feeling. So again, if you have sensitive eyelids, squirrel eyeshadow brush is the way to go for you. Okay, and then the Z11, if I just run my fingers through it, we can see that it snaps back into its position quite nicely, also very rapidly. So again, it has a very nice density here in the belly. I can really touch it, so it has a very nice core to it. So at least I hope anyway that it will live up to the name, that it will actually blend out color quite nicely on the eyelids. Alright, so let us play around with these three eyeshadow brushes. Alright, so I'm taking out one of my most beloved eyeshadow palettes from Laura Mercier. These are my go-to matte eyeshadow colors, as you guys can see here. So this is what we're going to be using today. And I'm going to use the Z-5 first, and I'm going to use this to apply the first base color. And I think I'm going to be using this white color here, as a highlighter first. I'm going to apply this at the highest points of my cheeks. And I'm also going to apply this all over my eyelid. Okay, so I actually do love the Z-5 for this, because this is a white quote-unquote eyeshadow color. So if you pick up a ton of this eyeshadow color, it might cause problems for you later, because you might alter the color of the eyeshadow. But I have to say that the Z-5 here, it just picks up a very minimum amount of product on the brush head, so you don't really again have to worry about picking up way too much. And because the brush head is so big for the Z-5, it fits into my eyelid space quite nicely and quite effectively. Alright, so now I'm gonna get one of my most favorite colors. This is the color Fresco. Yeah, I'm gonna switch to the other side of the brush where I didn't use for the white color. Now this is what I'm going to use to apply color all over my eyelid. It's actually able to apply a very nice diffused amount of color in no time, which is actually remarkable. Okay, so just like the PS4 brush, like this brush here, when I first talked about this in a vlog months ago, I loved how the tips of the bristles of this brush here is actually able to lay into my socket line area. It's actually able to apply color there. And I can say that that's the same for the Z-5, wherein if I just lay my brush here, and especially if I have color here on the tips of the bristles, and I just want to apply color in my socket line, I can also do that. At least I'm also blending out the color and laying it down at the same time. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to get this very warm brown here, and I loaded the tip of the brush head of the Z11 here, and I'm just going to apply this into my socket line and see how well this will blend out the color. So it was actually able to apply a very like full impact kind of a color onto my socket line, and it was actually also able to blend it out. Very interesting. I wasn't expecting that. Again, it's very soft. It doesn't hurt, like, the socket of my eyelid, because sometimes if there's like, a brush that's way too strong, and then if you lay it in this portion and then you press it, sometimes you feel the pressure in your eyeball. Okay, so let me just apply color in this eye now, and I'm just blending it. Wow, that emphasized my socket line quite intensely. So let me get this very nice, like, grayish brown here, like a taupey brown color. And let me just add more intensity. And also I'm just going to blend out the colors to create lift. It's quite nice. Now if you're someone who has difficulty in blending out matte eyeshadow colors, this brush will help you to pick up the right amount of color and also to lay it on your eyelids without any problems at all. It's like a foolproof kind of a thing. Okay, so now I'm going to try the Z-10 brush, and I'm going to use this to apply definition in my eyes. So I'm going to start light first. Okay, so obviously I was thinking of going like, intense, but let's not do that. So I'm going to pick up this shade again from this Laura Mercier palette that I curated, and I'm just going to apply some of that here in my lower lashes, and I'm going to create like, a lift, and I'm going to connect that into my socket line. Now I do have to say that I don't have Suki brushes in my collection, but I think, like, just in my head right now, after seeing some people use it, like, seeing Lisa Eldridge use, like, the Suku detail brush when she's applying detail makeup looks on people, I think they look very similar to each other. But again, I won't be surprised, because I think, if I remember correctly, Chikuhodo makes the brushes of Suku. Okay, so now let's go intense, and I'm going to pick up this very beloved eyeshadow from NARS. So this is in the color Bengali, if my memory serves me right. Now I am just saving this. Now I really do need to buy a new one, but the eyeshadows from NARS now have gotten smaller, so I'm like, for the same price, I'm like, really? Why did it get so small? Okay, so I'm just using the brush head now, and I'm applying it here onto the upper, like, portions of my upper lash line into the, and I have to say that it's actually able to apply a very nice amount of color on my upper lashes. Now I wish that the brush head here was just a tad thinner, maybe the same density and design as like the brush head from the definer brush from the Chocolat 5-piece set, because I think that one will apply more precision on the lash line, because I think the brush head here is just a little way too thick and chubby for that. But so far I have not seen any, like, fallout here on the upper cheeks just from, like, falling from the brush head of this definer brush. Okay, and I'm gonna use this now and pat this to define, like, the outer V portion. Okay, so I'm just blending it out so that we have more definition in that portion of the eye. Okay, and just blending them together with the other colors into my socket line, and just blending it outward and upward. And I'm just going to apply a little bit of that here in the outer portion of my lower lash line. Okay, so let me do my other eye now. Okay, now I do have to say that this definer brush is actually great when you just want to, like, intensify the outer V portion, because it just really helps you to pack a punch in that area. And if you have especially sensitive eyes and you find that, like, adding pressure in this part here, like, it's not comfortable because of, like, the type of brush head that you have, I think having a brush head like this in your disposal can really help you to, like, play around with your eye makeup look. Alright, and now to finish off this experiment that we have with all of these brushes, I'm going to go back and use the FO-10 again. And this is what I'm going to use to pick up this very glittery eyeshadow from the Honey palette of ColourPop, and I'm going to be using the FO-10 for this. And the reason why I'm doing so is because, again, as I've said, this reminds me of the pads of our fingers. And if you are a makeup enthusiast, if you're very playful, you actually always use your fingers to apply glittery eyeshadows, and I think this can be quite useful. So let's put it to the test. So I'm just tapping the brush head here on the palette, and it does pick up a ton of glitter, and I'm just going to pat it all over my eyes, and it's actually adding the product quite nicely, and so far no fallout has been happening on the upper portions of my cheek. So that's actually quite great, because this is actually very important for me, because, like, glitters are very difficult to remove. So that's why I don't like using my fingers when I am using, like, glittery eyeshadows. And I'm so glad that this Chikuhodo FO-10 will work in actually applying glittery eyeshadows for us. And so far, no fallout. So at least this eyeshadow brush has a very nice hold of, like, glittery eyeshadow products, and I am so grateful for that. Of course, if you start rubbing this eyeshadow, like, look in, like, windshield wiper motions, I'm sure you will flick a lot of the glittery eyeshadows. So that's why I'm always very careful, and I'm just, like, patting it, making sure not to drag it. Okay. Alright, so yeah, I think that's my vlog for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed me getting to know these new brushes that I purchased off of Fude Beauty. So again, let me show you guys what I got. So I got the cheek brush from the Koyudo Kakishibuzome line, the Chikuhodo FO-10 from the FO series of Chikuhodo, and 3 eyeshadow brushes from the Z series. Now, I'm so glad I have these brushes in my collection, well, especially, like, these, like, squirrel eyeshadow brushes from the Z series, because it just adds more, like, dimension into my brush collection. And I have been working quite recently with an actress who has quite sensitive skin, so at least having this in my disposal is actually going to be, very helpful for me, because, so, sometimes if I use goat haired eyeshadow brushes, I can see that it drags the skin sometimes, and I can also see that it kind of like lifts, like, the product. So I really needed these specific brushes in my collection. Now, truthfully, this Koyudo Kakishibuzome brush was, like, an addition, because it's just like such a waste if I don't get it, because I have been wanting to try it for a very, very long time. So yeah, so that's my vlog for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed me showing you these new additions into my brush kit. So if you have more questions about how I use these brushes and what type of products I use it with, please let me know down in the comments box, and let's have a conversation about it, okay? Alright, so I'm gonna let you guys go now, because I am sweating excessively from my pits below. So I need to go and pop into the shower, because the heat is getting to me. Alright, I'm gonna let you go now. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you're having a good day wherever you are. Bye bye.